So a goalless draw at Ewood Park meant Saints failed to win for a third game in a row. Steve, you were there. What was your take on the goalless draw yesterday?
Yeah, it wasn't a classic. That's for sure. It's not one that's going to live long in anybody's memory. I wouldn't have thought. I mean, basically the only positive to take out of it is a clean sheet, and even that was. I mean, even looking back at that game, it was kind of a given, really. Blackburn offered next to nothing, really. A couple of little sort of scuffed efforts on the break, and one half decent lob that was presented to him by us in the first half. Yeah, we just couldn't quite get going, really. It was a bit stodgy. I don't think the wind helped, but ultimately same for both sides, really. But it was blowing a bit of a gale. But yeah, we just looked like just a yard off the pace, really. Very frustrating, and yet we still created 2 or 3 presentable opportunities. Aribo's hit the bar with a decent header where he's basically had to generate all the power himself. Adam Armstrong's missed a chance that I think 9 times out of 10 you'd expect him to at least hit the target. And then obviously Walker Peters, 5 minutes from the end or so, where another one's kind of cleared off the line and they've scrambled it away. Very frustrating. And also, again, we're kind of looking at this scenario where once again we're playing with a structure when we have an actual centre forward on the pitch. The rest of the time it's all a little bit flaky and it doesn't seem to quite be working as planned. Irritating. And you can kind of just tell by the the mood in the away end was certainly one of frustration, a little bit of that frustration boiling over among some, those with shorter patience than many of the rest of us. But it's irritating one. But I don't think at the end of the day, if we'd held on at Ipswich on Monday, then we go into yesterday's game with a very different attitude. But I don't know whether there's a sort of subconscious psychological thing of, well, we're probably not going to get top 2 now, so let's so it's kind of sloopy shoulders, and we're going to feel sorry for ourselves a little bit.
Which is a little bit concerning. Colin, who is watching live, he says, let's not sugarcoat it. We were poor. We're limping into the playoffs at this rate. Colin, if you've been watching for any length of time, you will know that one thing we will never do is sugarcoat anything. We're guilty of many things on this podcast, but not sugarcoating anything. Glenn, we didn't register a shot on target until the 80th minute. I mean, what on earth? It was just turgid.
It was pretty much. You got to remember in this game, a point was a good result for Blackburn, and it's probably what they wanted. They probably need 4 or 5 draws to guarantee being in the Championship next season. So, a draw was what they wanted, and it was up to us to be better than that. And of course, and really, if you score the first goal, then the whole thing changes. And the miss by Adam Armstrong, which was actually one of the, I think it was about 5 minutes in, was it? It was one of the best moves that we came up with all game. It was a good cross fired over by Brooks. It's about the only thing he did as well. And to play an air shot there was a nightmare, especially when we've had so many games recently where we've been saying if only we took our chances, then these games would be out of sight. And that if that goes in, it's a completely different game. But overall, I agree with Steve. We put in a performance. It was the performance of a team that knows that automatic promotion has gone, and there was an element of going through the motions about it. I think you listen to managers sometimes, and they even before the Ipswich game, Russell Martin was going, 24 points to play for, and everyone else is like, yeah, all right, mate. Yeah. We're not getting 24 points. So even with sort of like immense positivity, we're still not. I think it hit everybody yesterday that it wasn't going to happen. And And ironically, with the other results going the way they were, if we'd won yesterday, I think a number of people would have been, "Oh, it's back on, perhaps."
Yeah,
But,
yeah, with Ipswich and Leeds both losing, that wasn't.
yeah,
We didn't see that coming.
it's surprising as Leeds champions elect and all that. So yeah, I mean, it was a flat, horrible performance. Nothing really much to to recommend it. I don't think anyone will be remembering much about the game at all. Yeah, we were unlucky with the Rebo's header. That was the other decent move that we managed all game, and we had a little flurry when we had what resembled a proper front line in the second half.
Mm.
Well, once all the lightweight boys went off, it was a little bit better. But yeah, I certainly wasn't expecting a goal. It was more hope than expectation towards the end, and I think I'd more or less given it up as 0-0 at half time. It just was generally poor. But yeah, I think both teams got what they wanted. Blackburn got a point, and we chalked the game off, which ultimately is not going to mean much come the end of the season.
I want to talk about, obviously, Jack Stevens. Glen continues to be a big talking point among fans. Russell Martin saying yesterday, I think the quote was, "I hope that by the end of the season, he'll be appreciated for what he is, instead of looking at him as a centre-half who isn't playing there." Russell Martin's kind of come out and been quite defensive about Jack Stevens. He's been questioned about it by the media, and rightly so. And obviously the fans continue to talk about it on the way to a game, on the way back from a game. And when the results aren't going the way they are at the moment, we're going to look back at that unbeaten run and the change that happened when he was trying to shoehorn Jack Stevens into the team. But it looks like he's here to stay for the rest of the season in that role.
Yeah, I mean, it all started when Flynn Downs got injured. And then we had the games where Russell Martin didn't bring Jack Stevens into the side to replace Flynn Downs, which he could have done. And what he did was he tried to play Will Smallbone as a 6 and brought Joe Rothwell into the team. And then we had that absolute nightmare against Hull where neither of them could receive the ball because they were both having terrible games. So basically, our whole ethos of playing out from the back was gone. And from that moment on, Russell seemed to panic and say, right, I want this extra passing option in midfield. I know, we'll play Jack Stevens at fullback and he can get into those areas and receive the ball. That's all well and good, but there's a cost to doing that. And the cost is basically yesterday, not playing with a left back. So I can kind of understand it, but I thought yesterday in particular, the cost outweighed the benefit, because I thought it completely sawed off Ryan Fraser, because he was basically left one-on-one the whole time with Callum Britton, who we took the mick out of this guy last week because he got the brainless sending off at St Mary's, but he played right back for Blackburn yesterday, and fair play to him. I thought he had an excellent game, kept Ryan Fraser really quiet. And it just occurred to me that it's more difficult for Fraser because he hasn't got a left back or a natural left back behind him. He's got no one making decoy runs. He's got no one sort of like making overlapping runs to give him an option to pass to. Now, what usually happens is that Stuart Armstrong gets over there, but because he wasn't playing, it was probably down to Rothwell to do it, and it just didn't work. So I felt a bit sorry for Ryan Fraser. It just seemed to cause a problem, not having a left back there. And also what it meant was that Blackburn didn't have to play another player over there, so they could afford to clog up the centre of midfield even more. So we might have had an extra player in there, but they did as well. And it just seemed to me that it's a tactic that could have been useful if we'd implemented it straight away when Flynn Downs got injured. But now Flynn Downs is back. To me, it's just not needed, and it's not about Jack Stevens and what sort of footballer it is. It's just a tactical decision that we're making at the moment that I don't think is doing us any favours. Because it means that we yesterday in particular, we could only really attack down one side of the pitch. Very, very occasionally, Jack Stevens got forward on that left-hand side, and we had the sort of combinations that you expect. But to me, it just causes more problems than it solves. And I just hope that we go back to trust him, what served us so well. The 4-3-3 formation with Flynn Downs in the midfield on his own. Okay, he might not have had the best of games yesterday, but he's such a good player. He totally knows how to play, totally knows where to be to receive the ball. And I just think we've got to get back to that as soon as possible. And certainly by the time the games start getting important again and towards the end of the season.
Do you think Ryan Manning can feel a bit aggrieved, Steve? I mean, I didn't watch much of the Championship football last season, but I mean, he was in the team of the year, wasn't he? At the end of the year, best left back in the league and quite a creative left back as well. Obviously, playing under Russell Martin. I think he had a couple of options for places to go. We sign him, and then he just finds himself out of favour at the moment, and that is as a result of Jack Stevens coming in and the things that Glen has just highlighted.
Yes, I mean one thing that I find interesting is how much Russell Martin very clearly listens to outside noise. Because let's be blunt about this. Ryan Manning has had an absolute torrent of abuse from certain sections of the fan base since week 1 this season.
With or without justification, is that?
I mean, yeah, by all means, criticise mistakes that are made, but some of it has been ridiculously over the top.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we as a fan base always have to have a scapegoat, and there's always one player that gets picked on, regardless of whether it's justified. Certain players get away with putting in 2 out of 10 performances here every so often because they're a fan favourite, and it's just the way it goes, unfortunately. But I do think that basically Manning is the easy fall guy from Martin's perspective, to shoehorn Stevens in that role, because it gets sort of fans off his back for picking a player that a significant percentage of the fan base don't think is good enough, and it allows him to play Stevens and have his sort of fearless leader in the team, even though he's not able to play in what Stevens would obviously deem his own best position. But yeah, I think Manning should feel a bit aggrieved, because at the end of the day, he is the only senior left back at this football club at the moment. Juan Larios is still kind of a hologram of something that may resemble a player at some point when he may or may not be fit again. But until such times, he is the left back that we've got. As you say, he was in Team of the Year last year. He's got good numbers at this level, and has proven he can play the system. Now, obviously, we know that Swansea conceded a boatload of goals last season. Okay, yeah, fine. They also scored a boatload of goals, and that's kind of what's been mirrored with us to an extent. I mean, we've scored slightly more goals and we've conceded slightly fewer. But yeah, I mean, the way the style of football is quite open, but Manning knows how to play that way. He's been drilled on it for 3 years now. So
yeah, that's the key point. He, when Manning plays, he does do that thing where he turns up in the centre of midfield and he plays very narrow. And so we're getting Jack Stevens to do that. Manning does that anyway most of the time, but also Manning offers the traditional left back stuff.
Yeah, the overlap, the crossing.
Yeah, which is I feel is what we're missing.
Being able to take a throw in as well, which also helps.
And I guess, Glenn, with the whatever happens, the next couple of league games, we're going to end up in the playoffs. There will be 3 games from the Premier League, regardless, and it's going to be about that momentum and playing your best players. And you don't want all that noise around. Are we still messing around and trying to fit somebody in? You want your best 11 going into those 3 big games.
What worries me more than that is this squad over the last, I know it's different players, but a lot of them are the same. Over the last 3 or 4 years, whenever they've had the chance to actually achieve something, be it break into the top of the league when Ralph was here, top half of the league, or to get out of the relegation zone at times last year, every time we've had the opportunity to do something worthwhile, we've blown it. And it does worry me that there is still a certain softness around the group of players that we've got. So when the pressure is on, like it was against Ipswich, we throw in, we find a way to lose the game. We find a way to not achieve what we set out to achieve, sort of thing. and that worries me more about the playoff game rather than any sort of like individual team selections. I just think if we're going to talk about the selections, if we persist with this, I just think we're going to make it harder for ourselves. I think I said a couple of weeks ago, to me, it's a tactic that if you're Manchester City with Manchester City players, then you can do it. And we're the pound shop version. And Russell Martin's the pound shop Pep Guardiola, whether he chooses to admit it, with much better hair, obviously. But I just don't. I don't like it. I just prefer things to be balanced. I like a balanced team, a right-footed right back, a left-footed left back, and who knows? Let's see where that can take us. And a proper centre forward, even if he's not the best player in the world, have someone who's used to playing there. And let's get away from shoehorning players in and finding a formation that fits around that. It just not for me.
The other player that was missing yesterday, Steve, was Stu Armstrong, and we missed his creativity in those forward runs a bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Rothwell, from games from the start, just doesn't seem to have. Whether I don't know whether there's correlation or causation here. Like the two don't necessarily overlap, but the games he started have generally been games where we've not played very well. And yet his contributions off the bench are generally a lot more positive. He's obviously scored 4 goals off the bench, but also when he's come on and just been able to run through midfield in sort of slightly more open space. He's been a lot more effective for us. Whereas yesterday, as Glenn mentioned earlier, when Blackburn were forced into the sub, they basically brought another central midfielder on and just clogged up the space, and he had nowhere to go. It was difficult, and we were relying on Joe Aribo to be the only guy linking midfield and attack, and that's kind of fine. He's good enough, but he's only one player, and he needs a little bit of support. And unfortunately, he didn't have an awful lot of it from either flank, really. As Glenn mentioned earlier, Ryan Fraser was left a bit isolated. David Brooks was involved early and should have had an assist for Armstrong early on, but after that he kind of disappeared from the game. Really, he didn't get involved at all. It's a problem, but it's one where you can't just rely on having one player available to make a huge difference. And unfortunately, we now seem to have probably 3, maybe 4 of those players now. I mean, if you think Carl Walker-Peters, Flynn Downs, Stu Armstrong, and Che Adams, in order to have a proper structure in our team, that's not great that we now seem to be in that position. When 3-4 months ago we thought, okay, we've got a bit of depth, we're okay, we can absorb this sort of mini injury crisis, and we were still unbeaten through it in January, February. It's slightly concerning coming into the business end of the season.
Yeah, with so much at stake as well. Glenn, quick bit on the subs yesterday. We've been talking in recent weeks about whether they had an impact or not. There were a couple of signs, like Cinnamana seemed all right yesterday when he came on. Maybe Adozie.
What's that meme that Gattuso's in? Sometimes pretty good, sometimes pretty whatever. Yeah, some of them were all right. I thought Adozie and Sulemana did okay when they came on. Not Sulemana's biggest fan, as everyone knows, but he made a difference. I thought when he came on, he was a lot more direct than certainly than David Brooks was, and he was unfortunate because Adozie put that pass through to him in the second half, and he got there at the same time as the goalkeeper. But you could see what he was trying to do, and he provided a threat that wouldn't have been there because of his pace. So Adams had to come on. That was simple, but I thought, Fitz, Will Smallbone is not a good impact sub because he doesn't add. You're looking for your midfield or your substitutes to add energy. He's not going to do that. He's not that sort of player. So I don't like it when he comes on as a sub. He never seems to impact the game in a positive way. And Sekamara was a waste of time again, as he always is. Gave away a couple of free kicks. I think we didn't give away many free kicks all game. He was about 50% of them when he came on, so he just added nothing. And again, I repeat that I would rather have Sulemana as a sub playing centre forward than have Sekumara on there. I'd rather have one of the kids on the bench, a Tyler Diblin or a Sam Ammo.
Yeah,
it's just when you're bringing him on as the fifth sub to make a difference, you do begin to think, we've given up here. But there you go. That's harsh based on just that. But I see it too often with him. He just comes on, and instead of making the most of the minutes he's given, he just does nothing, and he's not exactly sticking his hand up for a regular place in the team. And
no, you're right. And there are so many younger players that potentially could come in and grab that opportunity. That's the thing, isn't it? That hunger that seems to be missing a bit at the moment. But...
Yeah, maybe, but no, I thought that the subs are a mixed bag. But I mean, the wingers in particular and Che Adams, they were kind of desperately needed because the structure hadn't been right from the start. So you can't really hand out loads of credit to correct something which was obviously wrong from minute one. Do you know what I mean? But I thought the one selection that did work, I thought, was Joe Aribo. Playing in midfield, I thought he was really good, and I thought he was good against Ipswich as well. And that's a little clue to my player of the week.
that brings us rather nicely on to our TSP player of the week. We didn't do it after the Ipswich game on Monday, so let's do that now. Glenn, let's come to you first.
Yeah, let's go with Joe Aribo, because he's come into the side. He's played 2 games in a row, which I don't think he might not have done this season. Might be wrong on that, but he's a player that I think there's a lot more to come from him. In this league that we're in now, and the way he's kind of turned perceptions around, including mine, I kind of think there's a lot more to come from this guy. So I would like to see him get given a run of games. The question mark I have against him is fitness, but he hasn't really had a run of games since certainly this season, and he was just sort of getting a run of games, I think, when he went to the AFCON. So I would like to see him keep that place in the team, and see how much he can improve over the next few games. But I thought his performance against Ipswich and his performance against Blackburn, I thought were as good as anything else that we had out on the pitch. So I'll go for him.
Any standouts for you, Steve? I guess it's going to be from Monday rather than from yesterday. I cast my mind back to Monday. I remember Jack Stevens, we thought had a good game, didn't he, at Ipswich?
Yeah, Stevens was very good at Ipswich, I thought, because of, as I mentioned earlier, the kind of experimental position of having him as theoretically lining up as a left back, but never really ever playing there apart from when the opposition have got the ball out on that flank, has worked really well against the better opposition that we've played. So it worked really well against Ipswich. It worked really well at West Brom. But it's just against the kind of bog standard mid-league teams where we get a little bit clogged down, and it just doesn't quite
doesn't tick, does it?
Yeah, as Glenn said, there are more downsides to upsides with it for me. But yeah, he was good on Monday, but I think Stu Armstrong would be my nomination, because let's be honest, we as you mentioned, we noticed that he wasn't there yesterday. That was a hole to fill, and we didn't fill it suitably.
Okay, let's go with Joe Aribo, Jack Stevens, and Stu Armstrong for the player of the week vote then.